Let's get one thing straight. The first humans did not eat breakfast, not in the way we think of it. There was no waking up at a set time, no pouring a bowl of cereal, no putting bread in a toaster. There was no coffee brewing. The very idea of a scheduled morning meal, a distinct and separate event called breakfast, is a modern invention. It's a product of agriculture, of settled life, and later, of industrial work schedules. To understand what our ancestors ate in the morning, you have to forget everything you know about your own morning routine. You have to erase the kitchen, the clock, the pantry full of food. You have to imagine a world where the only thing that mattered upon waking was survival. The question isn't really, what did they eat for breakfast? The real question is, what was the first thing they ate after waking up? And the answer for almost all of human history was simple. It was whatever they could get. Or it was nothing at all. To really get this, we need to go back, not just a few hundred years, not even a few thousand. We need to go back hundreds of thousands, even millions of years, to see how our relationship with food and with the morning was forged. Let's start before we were even properly human. Think about our early ancestors, hominins like Australopithecus, walking upright on the African savanna millions of years ago. They weren't mighty hunters. They were small, vulnerable creatures. They were prey as much as they were predators. Their world was a constant search for calories. What did their morning look like? It likely began with the sun. They would have slept in groups, probably in trees or near protective rock formations for safety. The first light was a signal to move, to find food before something found them. There was no stored food, no pantry, no refrigerator. The world was their kitchen, and it was often empty. So, the first order of business was to find something to eat. This wasn't a leisurely stroll. It was a focused, necessary task. The first food of the day might have been a handful of insects pulled from a rotting log. It could have been digging up a tough, starchy root with a stick or their bare hands. Maybe they found some leftover fruit dropped by birds. It was opportunistic, small, and probably eaten on the move. The concept of a meal didn't exist. There was just eating. You ate when you found something. You stopped when it was gone or when danger appeared. The morning wasn't about sitting down to a pleasant meal. It was about fueling the body for the search for more fuel. Their diet was mostly plant-based, supplemented with whatever small protein they could scavenge or catch. Think tubers, leaves, seeds, nuts, insects, and maybe the remains of the kill left behind by a real predator like a lion. They weren't cooking. They were eating everything raw. Their teeth and jaws were much larger and stronger than ours, built for grinding tough, fibrous plant matter. So, for these very early ancestors, the first meal of the day was a mouthful of whatever they could find first. It was a functional act, not a cultural one. Then something changed, a huge world-altering change. Our ancestors, a later species like Homo erectus, learned to control fire. This happened somewhere around 1 million years ago, give or take. It's impossible to overstate how important this was. Fire changed everything about our diet, our social lives, and even our bodies. Fire meant warmth and protection from predators, but most importantly, it meant cooking. Cooking is a form of external digestion. It breaks down tough fibers in plants and proteins in meat. It makes them easier to chew and digest. This unlocked a huge new world of calories. Roots that were once too hard to eat could now be roasted until they were soft and sweet. Meat became safer to eat because cooking killed parasites and bacteria. And this is where the first hint of something like a breakfast might appear. Imagine a group of Homo erectus 500,000 years ago. They've had a successful hunt. They brought down a large animal, maybe a giant deer or a wild boar. They couldn't eat the whole thing at once. So, they cooked a large portion of it over the fire at night. They feasted. They filled their bellies. It was a time of community, of safety around the glow of the fire. And then they slept. When they woke up the next morning, the fire might be embers, but there would be something new. Something that Australopithecus never had. Leftovers. There by the fire pit would be cold, cooked meat from the night before. There might be a few roasted tubers that didn't get eaten. This was a revolutionary change. For the first time in our lineage, it was possible to wake up and have immediate access to a high-calorie, easily digestible food source. That cold piece of roasted meat was an incredible advantage. It meant you could eat a substantial amount of energy right away, without having to spend hours searching for it. You could fuel your body for the day's activities, whether that was another hunt, moving camp, or gathering plants. So, the first breakfast, for humans who used fire, was likely leftovers, cold steak. A warmed over piece of whatever was cooked the night before. It wasn't a planned meal. It was just the logical thing to do. Waste not, want not. This pattern would hold for a very, very long time. Now, let's move forward to our own species, Homo sapiens, the hunter-gatherers. These are the people we were for the vast majority of our existence. From about 300,000 years ago until the dawn of agriculture just 10,000 years ago, we lived as nomadic or semi-nomadic bands. Our bodies and brains are the product of this lifestyle. What was their morning like? It was varied. There was no single hunter-gatherer diet, just as there is no single modern diet. It all depended on where they lived. A group living by the coast had a different life than a group on the plains of Eurasia or a group in a dense forest. But we can imagine some common scenarios. Scenario 1, the morning after a big kill. This is the ideal situation. The band has been successful, a mammoth, a bison, a giant elk. The night before was a feast. The morning after, breakfast is easy. It's cold mammoth meat. It's a piece of fat which was incredibly valuable for its calorie density. Maybe someone takes a chunk of meat and warms it on the embers of the fire. This is a breakfast of champions. It provides the energy needed to butcher the rest of the animal, process the hide, and do the other work that comes with such a bounty. Scenario 2, the day-to-day gathering. Big kills were not a daily event. They were rare and celebrated. Most days were about the less glamorous but more reliable food sources. In this case, the morning meal, if there was one, was small and functional. The women of the group, who were primarily the gatherers, might wake up and begin their day's work. They might not eat anything at all until they found it. Their breakfast would be the first edible things they came across. A handful of berries picked from a bush, a few nuts cracked open with a stone, a nutritious insect. This wasn't a sit-down meal, it was grazing, eating as you go. This is a pattern seen in many modern hunter-gatherer groups. There isn't a strict 3 meals a day structure. People eat when they are hungry and when food is available. Sometimes that means a small snack in the morning. Sometimes it means not eating until midday or later. Their bodies were adapted to this. They can handle periods of fasting. Our modern need to eat, as soon as we wake up, is a learned behavior, not an innate biological imperative. Scenario 3, scarcity. There were lean times. The hunt failed. The weather was bad. The plants weren't in season. In these times, the first humans woke up and ate nothing. Their breakfast was a gulp of water and a tightened belt. They started the day hungry, and that hunger was the motivation to find food. This was a normal part of life. The human body is remarkably good at running on stored fat. The state of ketosis, which is popular in modern diets, was likely a regular metabolic state for our ancestors. They didn't have a choice, so what specifically might have been on the menu? Again, it depends on the location. In a coastal area, a morning meal might have been some leftover cooked fish from the night before. Or it could have involved a short walk to the shore to collect some shellfish or check a fishing weir. Mussels, clams, oysters. These were reliable and easy to gather sources of protein and minerals. In a forest, it might be leftover roasted game like deer or boar, or it could be a handful of last season's nuts stored in a skin bag or a crevice. It might be mushrooms found on the morning's walk, or the eggs from a bird's nest they had been watching. On the savannah, the big game leftovers were key, but on a normal day, it was all about the underground storage organs of plants. Tubers and roots, things like yams or wild carrots. These were the carbohydrate staples for many groups. They might have been roasted the night before and eaten cold in the morning. And we can't forget the less palatable sounding options. Insects were a major food source. Grubs, ants, termites, grasshoppers, they are packed with protein and fat. For a hunter-gatherer, a log full of termites was a fantastic source of calories. It's very likely that a handful of roasted termites or grubs was a common morning snack. The key thread through all of this is opportunism. There was no breakfast food. There was just food. The distinction we make between breakfast foods, eggs, cereal, pancakes, and dinner foods, steak, pasta, curry, is completely arbitrary and modern. For our ancestors, food was food. If you had cold roasted bison for dinner, you had cold roasted bison for breakfast. It was that simple. There was also no rush. Our concept of breakfast is often tied to getting out the door for work. A quick bowl of something before the commute. Hunter-gatherers had work to do, but it was integrated into their lives. The day started slowly. People would wake with the sun, tend the fire, talk, and plan the day. The eating, if it happened, was part of this slow, social start to the day. It wasn't a separate, timed event. For hundreds of thousands of years, this was the human breakfast. Leftovers from a successful hunt, a small snack foraged on the go, or nothing at all. Our bodies evolved in this environment of feast and famine, of intermittent eating. Then, about 10,000 years ago, everything changed again. This was the agricultural revolution. And humans began to settle down. They learned to cultivate crops like wheat, barley, rice, and corn. They learned to domesticate animals like goats, sheep, and cattle. This was the end of the nomadic hunter gatherer lifestyle for most of humanity. And it was the birth of the modern meal structure. Farming meant a predictable, storable food source. For the first time, people had a surplus. They had granaries filled with grain that could last through the winter. This stability changed the morning completely. You no longer had to wake up and immediately search for food. The food was right there, but it wasn't ready to eat. Grain has to be processed. It has to be threshed, winnowed, and ground into flour or meal. This takes work. The earliest farmers likely created a simple food from these grains, a gruel or a porridge. They would take the coarse ground grains, add water, and heat it over the fire. This was the original breakfast cereal, a warm, mushy, calorie-dense meal. It was easy to make, easy to eat, and it provided the energy for a hard day of physical labor in the fields. This is the direct ancestor of our oatmeal, our grits, our porridge. For thousands of years, across many cultures, a bowl of hot grain mush was the standard breakfast. The Romans ate a porridge called pulse. Throughout medieval Europe, peasants started their day with a bowl of gruel made from whatever grain they grew. With farming also came bread. The ability to make flour led to flatbreads, cooked on hot stones or in early ovens. A piece of bread, perhaps with a bit of cheese from a domesticated goat or a smear of honey, became a common morning meal. It was portable and energy-rich, so the agricultural revolution created the first truly scheduled breakfast. It was a meal born of routine. You wake up, you milk the cow, you feed the animals, you eat your porridge, and then you go to the fields. The rhythm of farm life created the rhythm of our modern meal times, but it still wasn't the breakfast we know today. The variety was limited. For most people, it was the same bowl of mush or the same piece of bread every single day. The idea of breakfast as a varied and exciting meal is much, much more recent. The final transformation came with the Industrial Revolution and the 20th century. People moved from farms to cities. They worked in factories and offices with rigid schedules. The workday started at a specific time, so you had to eat before you left. The breakfast meal became even more entrenched in the daily routine. At the same time, new technologies and global trade made a wider variety of foods available. Sugar became cheap. People could get foods from all over the world. This is when the modern Western breakfast began to take shape. In the 19th century, a health food movement in the United States led to an interesting invention. Doctors like John Harvey Kellogg were looking for a simple, digestible, and wholesome food for their patients. They experimented with cooked wheat dough and ended up creating the first flaked breakfast cereal. It was marketed as a health food, a convenient alternative to the heavy, greasy breakfasts of meat and eggs that were becoming popular. The invention of packaged, ready-to-eat cereal was a marketing triumph. Companies told people that breakfast was the most important meal of the day. They created cartoon characters to appeal to children. They made it seem like a quick bowl of cereal, and milk was the scientifically proven best way to start your day. And so, we arrived at our modern idea of breakfast, a scheduled, distinct meal with its own special category of foods. A meal driven by convenience and marketing as much as by nutrition. When you sit down to your bowl of cereal, or your toast and eggs, or your yogurt and granola, you are participating in a very new human tradition. It's a tradition that is only a few generations old. For the overwhelming majority of our time on this planet, the morning meal was a different story. It was a story of survival, not convenience. It was the cold, greasy leftovers of a hard-won feast eaten by a fire as the sun came up. It was a handful of sour berries and crunchy ants eaten on the move while searching for something more substantial. It was the tough, starchy root that took 20 minutes to dig out of the hard ground. And very often it was nothing at all. It was the feeling of an empty stomach in the cool morning air, a feeling that told you one thing: it's time to get to work. The world is your pantry, but you have to go out and fill it yourself. That was the breakfast of our ancestors. It was real, it was honest, and it was what made us human.